I'll give you one guess as to what today's video is about. Yeah, rabbits. No, not rabbits. In this video, I'm going to show you my dust collection solution and how I made it. Along the way, I'm going to share some hopefully helpful tips on how you can make one too and not spend an enormous amount of money, which some people manage to do. Welcome to With the Grain, the show where I cover myself in sawdust and make videos about it. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. I'm producing at least one video a week at the moment. It would be great to have you on board. As you get more and more power tools in your workshop, whether it's a big workshop or a small workshop, you're going to be creating more and more dust. You need some way of getting rid of that. A little home vac might be okay. If you've only got a small shop and you've only got one tool that you never really need to move around, then maybe that's fine. But as soon as you get more and more, it becomes a real pain to move a big shop vac around, even if you put it on a cart. So you may want to think about an integrated system, and that's what I'm going to show you today. Hopefully along the way you'll pick up some hints and tips that will save you some money and a lot of aggravation in the process. Whatever solution you use, it needs to make your life easier, not harder. If it's harder, then you have to drag something around on a cart, for instance, that may not suit you if you've got lots of power tools all over the place. Hoses get in the way, cables get in the way. It actually can be quite dangerous. The last thing you really want is tripping over a vacuum and going hands down straight onto your table saw, because it's not very convenient and it makes a real mess of the blade. They're expensive. They are. So the solution I had to come up with was to put an integrated system down the side. So I'm going to show you how that works. This end of the shop is mainly taken up by the bandsaw, which is sitting on its dolly. Once you've put a dust extraction system in, it's quite likely that you might actually have to modify the tool in order to be able to maximize its efficiency. But with the bandsaw, there's not very much you can do because there's so little to work with. These blast gates are literally just attached to 68mm rainwater piping, which is ridiculously cheap. And then all the connectors are really cheap as well. And they make for a really good system. These ports are all homemade, as you can see. They're far better than the ones that you can buy that are made out of plastic. All a blast gate is a way of isolating an inlet, so you're not trying to suck through more than one inlet at once. That's literally all they do. They're pretty easy to make. They don't cost really any money if you've got lots of scrap plywood lying around like I do. This part of the workshop has a grinder and the pillar drill in it, and between them is another port which has a flexible hose on it, so I can angle either direction. So I can either suck the filings out, which is probably the worst thing you need to suck into a filter, but there you go. And obviously the sawdust coming off the pillar drill. Now, if you're using a Forstner bit on a pillar drill, you'll know just how much sawdust that produces, and it's really useful to be able to suck it away. Because I've got a woodshed on the side of the workshop, I decided to put the vacuum and the cyclone that I've got out there, partly because it saves noise, and also because the air coming out of a vacuum still has particles in it. I figured it was probably a really good idea for air quality to put the thing outside, and therefore I wouldn't have to breathe the particles inside. I have a port over here as well. Now again, this hose is removable. It's just a friction coupling, and it connects to the hose that goes onto the bottom of my lathe. Now, it's impossible to catch all the dust on a lathe. You're never going to do it. They throw chips meters away from where you're working. What I've done is I've built a small collection bin underneath, which you can see here is actually just a piece of guttering downpipe collector, and that underneath connects into a pipe and goes into the port on the wall. Now, it's not designed to catch everything, but what it is useful for is grabbing handfuls of sawdust that come off of whatever it is that you're working. A couple of things to mention. As I said earlier, I use 63mm hose for most things. This stuff comes compressed like this. It's hilarious when you undo it. Your dog goes mad because he thinks he's being attacked by an enormous snake. These gutter couplings are standard, normal 68mm gutter couplings. Now, strangely, they fit exactly inside the 63mm pipe. They obviously taper down to take the internal diameter of a piece of gutter. As a solution, this is a very good one. The other good thing about this stuff is that it's designed obviously for water flow. Now, obviously air is not water, but they do move in similar ways and have similar characteristics. Both respond to friction, particularly if it's full of dust. Having a smooth, rigid pipe is an awful lot more efficient than trying to throw air and sawdust through something like this, which has got ridges all the way down the inside. Each ridge will create its own vortex of air disturbance, which will then slow everything down and probably catch lots and lots of what you're trying to get rid of. So outside in the woodshed, You can see the hose coming through the wall into the cyclone, which is sitting underneath the vacuum. The vacuum just pulls the stuff into the cyclone, which then drops into the bucket underneath. You might be wondering how on earth I managed to turn the vacuum on and off. It's attached to an infrared socket controller, which was about £8 or £9. I'll put the link in the description, and it just has a remote control that goes with it, which means that I can just turn it on and off from everywhere I am. I glued some magnets to the back as well, so I can just stick them to the tools that I'm working with at the time. These cheap plastic blast gates that you can find on Amazon for about £4 or £5, just don't bother with them. They're absolutely terrible. When you pull the slider out, it doesn't seal properly, and then because of the way it's designed, you shut them, and all the sawdust that you've been sucking through that hasn't made it gets caught up in the gap, and then you don't get a seal. Make your own, it's not hard. I'll do a video probably on this at some point when I extend the system at the end, because it's a much easier project than you might think it is, and you can get a really good result from it too. Another thing that people worry about when they're doing this is static. Now, on a massive industrial system where you've got huge quantities of PVC pipe running over the place, probably 100mm or 4-inch diameter, you may need to worry about static, in which case wrap a wire around the unit and earth it. If you've got a system on this sort of scale, you probably don't need to worry about static. You're certainly not going to be producing enough sawdust to be able to ignite it, which is what everybody worries about. The last thing I would say as a final tip is don't get sucked into the mistake of buying this enormously expensive piping that you see everywhere. Shop around. Please check out some of the other videos on this channel. I have some other ones about dust extraction that you might find interesting if you've watched all this all the way through to the end. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell, and then you'll see the notifications when the next ones come along. Cheerio, that's all for now. Bye-bye.